Hi, my name is Wolf, and through this series of videos I'm going to try and explain the crazy, over-the-top world nerds like me love so much, which is the grim dark universe known as Warhammer 40,000 for absolute beginners. So get comfy and prepare yourself for a Noob-Splaining session. So if you're watching this, you fall into one of three categories. 1. You're one of the people who heard Henry Cavill quit The Witcher, got rehired as Superman, and then fired again just as quickly. Henry then announced he is doing a Warhammer 40,000 TV show or movie with Amazon, which resulted in nerds like me all over the planet having spontaneous nerdfest eruptions and thought you had better check out what this Warhammer thing is all about. 2. You already know about Warhammer 40k, but want to see if you can learn something new. And 3. You're watching this with your holy blessed keyboard and hotline to the Inquisition ready to go full on exterminatus in the comments section the second I make a mistake, which will then result in a likely sarcastic scathing reply from myself if I can be bothered. Keyboard warriors, you have been warned, and for those of you who don't know what an exterminatus is, that's what these videos are all about. Not going to lie, I expect most people watching this to be in categories 2 or 3, so go on, comment down below which category you are. While you're at it, hit like, subscribe and turn on the notifications. Doesn't cost you anything, but certainly helps me a lot. I won't be doing the whole Patreon and merch store thing, so your sub really is appreciated. Right, let's get down to it, shall we? This video is meant as a basic introduction for people with little to no experience of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. So if that isn't you, but you know someone like that, share this video with them. Warhammer 40,000, often referred to as just 40k for short, is, to the outsider, a sci-fi tabletop wargame where people use painted miniatures, known as just minis, from one of several playable armies or factions, a tape measure, some rulebooks and a boatload of standard six-sided dice to fight a battle. Essentially, that is what the game is. But that's only a small part of it. Having existed for around 30 years now, it is arguably the biggest and most popular tabletop game worldwide. Sure, Battletech certainly has its followers and has been around for what feels like forever, but Battletech doesn't have Battletech stores, and to someone new could be mistaken for a Pacific Rim game. I doubt there are many people in the world who would not recognise, however, the distinctive look of the Space Marines, even if they can't name what chapter they're from. I'll explain what a chapter is in later videos, let's just get the basics down first. The people who do partake in the game, however, refer to it as the 40k hobby. This is because it can be split into three distinct parts. 1. The painting and collecting of your army or armies. 2. Playing the game either casually or competitively. And 3. The wider lore and stories surrounding the fictional universe. Most players jump into all three quite happily, but that doesn't mean you have to. A large number of players might only show interest in the lore, or just perhaps want to paint and collect some models, leaving them free to go for any models in the extensive and expensive range available. I can see the appeal to this, as there are many models I would like to paint that are not part of my chosen armies. Personally, I haven't played the game in a while, but that's mainly because I'm the only nerd in my social group. Collecting an army or armies is fun and daunting at the same time. Games Workshop, the people who make Warhammer, have a massive selection of amazing models available, but they do come with a price tag. However, it is worth it. In my opinion, they are some of the best made models in the world. Now, can you use non-Games Workshop stuff that looks similar? Well, yes and no. If it's just you and some friends playing at home, by all means yes. And some independent clubs will also allow this, but check with them and your opponent first. This practice is referred to as a proxy model. The bringing of proxies to a Games Workshop store, however, is a big no-no. And besides, I've yet to find anything that makes a good proxy and is anywhere near the Games Workshop quality of minis. The painting of the said mini is a skill all in itself, and as some argue, at its high form could be considered a work of art. There are painters out there who can make a model appear way more lifelike than real life. I would describe my skills with a paintbrush as okay, maybe just a little above average. I can paint, highlight, lowlight, blend, shade, texture, etc. to varying results. From okay to, oh, that looks nice dear, well done. Painting can be the most time consuming yet rewarding part of the hobby, proudly displaying the army you painted to anyone who will listen and even those that won't. I know about the time consuming, as my minis are still sat at the side of me waiting to be finished. Maybe I'll show some in future videos. In fact, let me know down in the comments if you want to see the monstrosities I've painted that I consider average. Now, if you're going to get into mini painting, then I would like to make a few recommendations. Now, remember, to play the game, you don't need to have a competition-winning quality painted army. It doesn't even need any of the other technical things I mentioned earlier like highlighting. Just need a basic covering of paints and colours on your army. The general rule is a minimum of 4 different colours on it to play in a Games Workshop store. A lot of independent stores, however, will let you play with stuff fresh off the sprue. especially if you just bought it in the store right there and then. Now, the second mini you paint will be better than the first, and the third better than the second, and so on and so forth. I've been painting these things on and off since the early 90s, and I'm still learning and improving every time I pick up a brush. But the more you do it, the better you will get. By all means, go out and watch several hints and tips videos from different peoples across YouTube that have way more talent than I ever will. I say using several, as different techniques help me grow as a painter no end, rather than just copying the same person. You definitely don't need to start with really expensive brushes, but you don't want to buy the cheapest crap you can. There are plenty available from independent model stores and even Amazon at a mid-range price, and they will last you for a good few years to start off with. Make sure you get various different size brushes, as you'll soon learn that you want the different sizes for different parts, whether that be in undercoating, highlighting, the more technical fiddly bits. So you'll want like a thick brush, a medium and a thin one, or a couple of each just to be safe. Now when it comes to the paints themselves, the Games Workshop paints themselves are really good quality. I cannot stress that enough. I love their paints, but they are also really expensive, and they're also in the wrong type of bottle if you're going to use a wet palette. Now the two most popular options to choose from as a replacement for Games Workshop paints are Vallejo's or Army Painter. Now I have paints from all three companies. Personally, I prefer the Army Painter ones, whereas one of my friends, yes I actually have a friend, actually prefers the Vallejo stuff, and other people prefer the Games Workshop stuff. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. I find the quality of all three paints is pretty much exactly the same. It's just the stuff in the dropper bottles is far easier to use than the Games Workshop stuff. You've probably heard this mentioned before. Thin your paints. Now if you get a wet palette, that will do the job for you. Now this is twice I've mentioned a wet palette, so yes, get a wet palette. Better still, you can make your own for 10% of the cost, and it does exactly the same thing. As soon as I switched to one, my painting skills went up by at least 10 levels. Now there are a few guides out there on how to make your own wet palette, but they're about 20 minutes long, and I think I could compress it down to just a couple. So if you want me to make a video on how to make your own wet palette, put it in the comments. So that's painting. Let's move on to playing the game. For many years, the standard game consisted of two armies of up to 2,000 points, where each model's point cost was added up individually for the cost of each model and any upgrades like better weapons, armour, etc. And yes, that was a hard cap of 2,000 points, so making an army that was dead on was a skill in itself. Many times my army lists were 5 points short of the maximum, which is fine. Going over point cap, however, is very much not allowed, and will get you removed from competitive play and most casual games in a lot of places, and is considered by many players the worst thing you can do. These days, while the point system is in play still mainly for competitions, there is also the power level system, where a squad costs power points for the entire squad rather than working out the individual price of each mini in the squad and its loadout. The power level system makes creating an army quicker, but the points level system allows greater customization of the squads, but also making them more expensive as upgrades are applied. With your army list ready, all you need now is the core rulebook, your army rulebook, or codex as they're called, plus any additional codexes that are relevant for your army, a 6 foot by 4 foot gaming area, a tape measure, a lot of 6-sided dice, some scenery, and most important, a willing opponent. In fairness, they don't need to be that willing, but you do need an opponent. A 2,000 point or 100 power level game, depending on which system you and your opponent have chosen, or which you're forced them to play, should take around 3 hours on average at first. However, once you get into the swing of it and start learning the rules and both players are going at full throttle, then a game can be completed in much less time, usually a little over an hour, as most battle report videos on YouTube will attest to. Some even come in at under an hour. The game is played in turns. Each turn is broken into phases in a set order. The phases are command, movement, psychic powers or magic spells, shooting, charge, fighting in hand-to-hand, morale checks. Now I think the names of the phases are pretty self-explanatory, so let's move on. Once you move to a new phase, you cannot go back, so if you set off a psychic power and forgot to move your tank, well, that's tough. Now most casual games though will let this slide, but in competitions it won't. Now I'm not going to go into the full ins and outs of all the rules and specific rules, as this is meant to be a short vid, but that's the basic of the game. And besides, there's an update coming out soon, so I can guarantee if I did go into any rules, they'll change them. And the lore. Now this is where the tabletop and world building varies greatly. Every faction has its own lore and canon behind it, painting them to be anything from the greatest warriors in the galaxy, the biggest threat to all known life forms, or just the most evil bunch of bastards since the canteen ladies at high school always made sure there were no burgers left when you got to the front of the queue. Yeah, I'm talking about you, Mrs. Baker. Anyway, according to the lore, the Space Marines are functionally immortal super soldiers, with powered armour that makes them damn near immune to anything that isn't designed to crack a tank in two on one shot. On the tabletop, yeah, they're tough, but they're not unkillable. In future videos I will go deeper into the lore aspects of each faction, the weapons and armour they use, vehicles, characters, etc, but I can tell this video is already getting a bit too long, so we'll leave it at this for now. And there you have it. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share with someone who will enjoy it. I won't ever be doing a Patreon or a merch store, so if you laughed at this or learned something, then clicking subscribe is the best way you can show your support for me. Thank you. Now I'll catch you next time, where I'll be giving a brief explanation of the factions from a lore point of view. After that it will be from the tabletop point of view, and then I'm going to start doing a deeper dive into each of the individual factions as we go on through this video series. Bonus fun fact for those with experience in 40k. I always assumed in that Heresy Detective video it was Black Templars because, well, Black Templars. It wasn't until I started editing this video I noticed they're actually 1st Legion Horus Heresy Marines, because, well, Dark Angels and Fallen.